were doing a day patrol alongside the French railroad that ran from Anwa down to Tam Key on the coast. They had built it prior to the Indochina War. But where there were streams, they had to put concrete culverts up so that the water would run under it and the trains could go over it. So it was a truncated structure. So anyways, we had two VC run in front of us. They were going as fast as they could, carrying AKs, and it was too far for us to engage. And they ran under one of the culverts and into the village. And we went up. We crawled up the side of the truncated structure, and we were standing on the top looking down toward the village, which I don't think had more than a dozen hooches in it. And when I was looking at it, I noticed that two Cobra gunships had fired white phosphorus rockets into the village, and one of them had burnt the side of a water buffalo quite bad. And water buffaloes hated us anyhow. And one of the Marines that had been the first that was sent down, one on each flank of the village, to peep it out, he come running back, and the water buffalo was right behind him, trying to run him down. So there was an M60 there that was the gun of a friend of mine, and he had walked down to talk to somebody else. I picked up his M60, and I fired about a 20-round burst into the side of the water bow's neck, and it fell dead. And the Lieutenant Garrett came down, and he said, "What happened here? Because if we killed a water buffalo, it would cost the 7th Marine Regiment $1,200. I said, "There's damned air wingers in the Cobra gunships. They killed that." And he got out his little notebook and he wrote that down. He said, "That's what I thought I saw." But he knew it wasn't true, but it got our ass out of the frying pan. So we then moved over the hill down into the village. And when we got to the very edge of it, that's when Lieutenant Garrett, who had been on the Prick 25 radio with Captain McCarthy, said, "Everybody frag all the holes," because it did, and that tactic was done so that you wouldn't sweep through the Ville and then they pop up behind you and shoot you from behind. So that's when I ran up to the first one, and I threw an M26 down inside, and grenades don't make much of an explosion, just kind of a whoop and some gray smoke comes out, no fireballs, it's stuff they put in Hollywood. And I moved down to the next hole, and I pulled another grenade out, because we were required to carry either 6 or 4 grenades and a smoke grenade, or 6 grenades. So we had a frag pouch. I reached into it for another one, and that's when I heard low talking down there from some old voices. And that's when I said in Vietnamese, "Lai Dai Dong Bang," and it means "come out, don't shoot." And that's when the Papasan, who was also the village chief, came up out of their position. And then the two older women came out, and they threw themselves on the ground and started to wail and tear at their clothes and all the stuff that, Vietnamese do when they mourn. And then he went down, and his first trip, he took a toddler out. And second trip, he carried out the infant and then the mother. And I could see them plainly. And it must not have been a very big location, that they were down inside, because the M26 had just ripped them stem to stern. So that's when Bob Wolf came down and got me, and they led me out of the village. It was the worst day I ever had in Vietnam, because I never worried about shooting an armed enemy soldier, because he was doing his job and I was doing my job as a Marine, and that's all there was to it. But I hadn't signed on even to do collateral damage, which is what they wanted. And so for years I underwent psychiatric evaluations with VA psychiatrists. And when it started out, I said it was 90% my fault because I threw it. And then a few years ago, when they called me in again for another evaluation, they said, I said, well, I'm going to say 30%. I said, I did throw it, but I said, I didn't do it with malice. And they said, well, we think you admitting that is a good thing, and it's the VA's opinion that you'll never drop down to anything below 30%, but we think 30% is manageable. That was a rating on my personal guilt.
Well, let me ask you, was this, after this fragging incident, was this something that, so long as you were in Vietnam, you were able to kind of put it out of your mind because there was so much else to do? But it's something that
for the most part, but I can remember one instance when a villager was carrying, I don't know if it was a piece of bamboo or what, but I got to the edge of a clearing and I saw him, and I thought he was carrying a weapon, and I pulled up to shoot him, and the man next to me, he pulled it down. He said, "Why are you shooting that farmer?" I said, "Because he's got an AK." He said, "That's not an AK." And he yelled, "Lie die." And the farmer, he came right over. And sure enough, it was a piece of bamboo. And then I was questioning my judgment from then on. But I also had suffered 3 traumatic brain injuries and had an eardrum blown out because they took a juice can, a big quart juice can, and they lashed it to a bamboo stick and filled it with liquefied composition B from an aerial bomb and pieces of rusty shrapnel. And they had snuck up during the night and they threw it at me. And I had just leaned down to take a hit off of a cigarette when I heard it hit right about 2.5 feet out from the edge of my hole. And it exploded and dug a big crater in the ground. And then I noticed that my right ear, it was wet and there was drops of blood in it. And as soon as they could, Captain McCarthy and Lieutenant Garrett came down, and I couldn't hear. And he wrote in his little field journal that he was going to medevac me, and I wrote, no, I don't want to be medevaced. And he just shook his head. But McCarthy was that kind of a guy. If you thought you could stay there. Well, Lieutenant Garrett, he got shot in the flak jacket by an M1 carbine, and it broke 3 of his ribs. And I went over to him, and we took his gear off of him, and we put his poncho liner in the back of his pack to make it look like he had his gear, because he refused to be medevaced also. And it was 3 weeks before he was able to carry his pack again.
Why would you refuse?
It was 3 weeks before he was able to carry his regular pack and do all the things he had done before the wounding.
Why did you refuse to be medevaced?
Because there's always the chance that, you see, the 7th Marines were the most engaged Marine unit in Vietnam at the time. And as soon as you'd get to Da Nang, either the Naval Support or the NSA or the other First Med, and they found out who you were, they tried to send you to other Marine units because they wanted to make you squad leaders and things. And I already had my friends there, and I trusted them, and that's why I refused.